So in my last gear review, I covered the Apollo 60 wing, so this orange wing back here. And in it, I compared it to a much bigger surf wing that I learned to ride on, the Infinity 76 or the Ride Engine Manta 76. Given how much I talked about it, I figured I'd follow up and give a full review of this larger Infinity 76 surf wing. So the short version of the review is basically, I think everyone should be learning on a big surf wing. It would have shaved a lot of time, months, maybe years off my learning process. And I think for new riders, in particular heavier riders in the 190 to 200 pounds, this could be a game-changing wing. So I think gear reviews are pretty useless unless you have some context around the rider. A little bit about me, I've been kiting for 7 years. 5 of those years I've been twin tipping. About 2 of those years I've been foiling. I'm about 215 pounds. I do ride a surfboard, so I have a little bit of experience with switching your feet and doing some tacks. In terms of the previous wings that I rode leading up to this one, I rode the Spacegate 65, which is really the recommended beginner wing for Slingshot. And then I also rode a Liquid Force Impulse. I rode a Shin P, I rode a North Speedster, but none of them compared in terms of stability or ease of use. Let's get some stats on this wing. It's a giant surf wing. It's 1,500 something square centimeters. It's got an aspect ratio of 3.7. It's got a wingspan of 765, and then it's got a chord, which is the top to bottom distance here, of 262. Pair it side by side with the Spacegate. In terms of wingspan, you see that it kind of dwarfs it. And so it's a higher aspect ratio wing. So let's get into the pros. The first pro is really that for a heavier beginner rider, it's much, much easier to learn. What does that actually mean? It's got a very low lift speed, so that means when you're going, you don't have to hit a high speed before the wing starts to lift up. Next, it's got a very predictable lift, so it kind of smoothly rises up as opposed to other wings, which just kind of rip you out of the water or drop you back in. Next, it's got a lot of side-to-side stability. This matters when you're up on the foil, out of the water and riding. It's just a much more stable platform to stand on. And then the last pro is that it's got a surprisingly high top speed. Because it's a higher aspect ratio wing, so that it's kind of much wider this way than it is tall this way, it actually rides much faster than this other beginner wing. So I think you'll get a little bit more mileage out of it, or you won't just ride it for a couple of months as a beginner, you can ride it for longer. I think these factors combined would probably cut the time to learn in half. So now let's get into the cons. So the first con is this thing is enormous. Really, the wide wingspan just makes it hard to pack into a car and a bit trickier to carry down the beach. The next con is that it's quite heavy. You don't notice it so much in the water, but if you crash your kite and end up doing a long walk home carrying the foil and the board, the weight adds up and you feel it in your shoulders. The last con is just these downward curved wings, which I think provide a lot of the stability, actually can get nicked and chipped pretty easily if you hit rocks or if you hit sand down below. It doesn't affect the performance too much. I've obviously got a lot of these, but over time you're eventually gonna wanna fix these. You might start to hear whistling from the wing. So it's not a major con, but I figured I'd point it out. The thing I might point out is comparing it to the Apollo 60 wing. If you haven't seen that review, you can click and see it here up above. But basically it's a smaller, faster wing that's more nimble, and it's a good progression. So once you've learned on the big wing, this is a great wing to move on to. So I believe this is the fastest and easiest way to get up and riding, especially for people who don't have a ton of time on the water and want to make the most of that time on the water. I think this wing would do it. It would have saved me months in my learning process. For those of you that have a bit more time on the water or access to the water, you can obviously learn on any of these foils. I could have learned on the Apollo 60, I could have learned on the Spacegate 65. I think this just gets you up and riding much faster. It's just a much more stable, easier platform to learn the basics on. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on the Infinity 76. Hopefully you found that useful. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. And if you've got any questions, throw them down in the comments below.